Most people who we talk to say that there is zero sign of accelerating inflation globally. What gives you confidence that we're actually seeing the beginning of something more sustained that actually could be called reflation?
Well, I mean, the confidence comes from the fact that central banks have been moving, and central banks, and in fact, markets have been predicting what central banks are going to do, and central banks have been following. So we've had a big shift down across the yield curve, both, US 10-year bond yields and, of course, at the short end, now pricing in rate cuts this year and next year from the US. And we've seen central banks around the world become much more dovish. I mean, Japanese minutes last week, we had South Korean making dovish noises, we got the Australian central bank making vaguely dovish noises, the Canadian, and so on and so forth. It's a long list of central banks that have changed from 12 months ago tightening money to now talking about being on hold or maybe even making dovish noises. So, liquidity and bond yields have adjusted to reflect that. That's what comes first, and then the economic data follows.
Well, and Chris, even to reinforce that, it appears, particularly with the Fed, that they're looking at asset values to some extent, and they're actually being more accommodative because they're worried about what's going in financial markets. At the same time, just take me through how this works, because we've had central banks being pretty accommodative, including negative interest rates over in Europe, for a good long time now, and yet it hasn't gotten inflation going. What's going to change so that a very accommodative Fed and ECB and, of course, BOJ are actually going to trigger inflation?
Well, I don't know how much inflation they're going to trigger. I think they're going to trigger a lot of reflation, which is really sort of lifting asset prices and lifting the economic situation. We'll get a little bit more inflation, I guess, 12, 18 months down the line, but not aggressive inflation. That wouldn't be my concern. I think really we're talking about economic reflation and financial market reflation, and that's triggered by liquidity and the shift in the stance from central banks. So it's very positive. I mean, the market's in good shape, I think, here.